right. Well, hello, everyone, and welcome to the first webinar of the second annual Community Science LI webinar series. We're really excited to have our second year of these really awesome webinar series. My name is Emily Hall, and I'm from CTEC Environmental Association. I'm a conservation policy advocate there, and I will be moderating today's webinar. Just a little reminder for folks, if you're not familiar with what the Community Science LI webinar series is, basically, it's a webinar series to highlight various community science opportunities around Long Island and how the data is accumulated by the public's influence of local environmental management efforts. The Community Science webinar series is brought to you by CTEC, the Long Island Sound Study, New York Sea Grant, the Peconic Estuary Partnership, and the South Shore Estuary Reserve. Just a little bit about us, if you're unfamiliar as well. CTEC is a 501c3 nonprofit dedicated to conserving Long Island wildlife and the environment. Long Island Sound Study is a bi-state partnership consisting of federal and state agencies, user groups, concerned organizations dedicated to protecting the sound. New York Sea Grant represents a statewide effort of integrated research, education, and extension services promoting coastal community economic vitality, environmental sustainability, citizen awareness, and understanding about the state's marine and Great Lake resources. The Peconic Estuary Partnership is a national estuary program that works to protect and restore the Peconic Estuary. PEP staff and partners support monitoring, research, collaboration, and education across the estuary. And the South Shore Estuary Reserve guides the preservation, protection, and enhancement of the natural, recreational, economic, and educational resources of the estuary through various partnerships. We're very, very excited today to have tonight's webinar cover everything about sharks and local shark ecology, community science efforts around them, and we have some fantastic experts to join us tonight. Dr. Mary Camhi from the Wildlife Conservation Society, Greg Metzger from the South Fork Natural History Museum and Nature Center, and Chris Scott from the New York Department of Environmental Conservation. So before we get started, I just wanted to go over a couple housekeeping notes. The webinar is being recorded and the recording will be available on CTEC's website shortly after the webinar concludes. We are also currently live on YouTube as well. Your video and microphones are turned off, but you are free to ask questions in the Q&A section at the bottom of your screen. If you don't have a question but want to share a resource or discuss amongst the group, you're more than welcome to use the chat box as well. All right, so thanks everyone again for joining us for the first webinar series back in the Community Science LI series. I'm really excited to talk about sharks. And I am now going to hand the presentation over to Dr. Mary Camhi.
Okay. I'm going to share my screen. Can you hear me? And can you see my talk? Can you see? You can't see.
We can't see the presentation yet, but we can hear you.
Okay, let's see it. Let's see if this helps. Can you see it now?
No.
Okay, hold on 1 second. I have to get out of this whole thing. I'm going to end my slideshow and start. Oh,
okay, well, we can see it now.
You can see it now. Okay, as long as you can see it now, I'm not going to touch anything else. Excellent. Okay, everybody, hi. And I want to thank CTEC and all the other groups for inviting us here to talk about sharks. I've been working on sharks now since the early 90s, and I do lots of other things now. So I'm actually really excited to have an opportunity to talk about something that's super near and dear to my heart. I'm with the Wildlife Conservation Society, and briefly, if you guys don't know who the Wildlife Conservation Society is, you may know about the Bronx Zoo and the New York Aquarium in Coney Island. WCS is the overarching parent organization of the Bronx Zoo New York Aquarium, but we also do conservation, field conservation all around the world. We work in 60 different countries, and in about 25 of them, we actually do marine conservation work, including right here in our own backyard, right here in the New York seascape. So I am excited to tell you about some of that work, but I'm going to take a step back and start with a little bit about just sharks in general. And there's so much I could tell you about shark ecology and biology. I'm going to keep it really short and high level, but hopefully if you have any questions, we can get to them at the end. So I want to tell you a little about shark biology, ecology, why sharks matter, why they're in trouble. Then we'll zero in a little bit on sharks in New York waters, and then the work that Wildlife Conservation Society, the program that I do with the aquarium called the New York Seascape Program, which is the marine conservation initiative of the New York Aquarium and the Wildlife Conservation Society, what we're doing and have been doing to promote shark conservation, both locally, nationally, and internationally. So sharks. People talk about sharks as if a shark is a shark. There are many, many, many different species of sharks. There are over 600, 500 species of sharks, and they're very close relatives, the skates and rays. You can kind of think of skates and rays almost as flattened sharks. They're very similar to ecology and biology. They just have different life forms. They belong to different taxonomic groups. But overall, there's about 1,200 species of sharks, and the skates and rays and sharks together, you might hear me call elasmobranchs. That's a commonly used term to refer to those two different groups. And you can see some of the images of the great amount of diversity in form, structure, color, etc. Below there. Now sharks are, and when I say sharks, please also realize that I'm also talking about skates and rays. Sharks, skates, and rays are distributed globally. And you can get an idea here that they're in almost every habitat. And this is the distribution of those shark species across different habitats. They're in all the world's oceans, less so in the Antarctic, but we know that there are some sharks like Greenland sharks that can stand really cold waters in the Arctic. But a large number of our sharks are coastal sharks, but there are also very many deep water sharks. We even have some of those here in New York, including the chain dogfish. Now, you've probably heard that sharks are in trouble. And I like to say that sharks suffer from an identity complex. At once, they're one of the most feared and maligned of all animals groups, and yet they're also among the most biologically vulnerable. And the reason is because of their life history traits. So as a group, and realize because there's so many species, this varies tremendously from one species to the next. But as a group, sharks are very slow growing animals. They have a long life expectancy. Some can live 60, 70 years or longer. They can take a very long time to reach sexual maturity. So for example, a very common shark in our water, the spiny dogfish, can take up to 21 years to become mature. That's longer than the humans and elephants, right? And at the same time, they often have very low fecundity, right? So combining all these factors, these life history factors, we end up with animals that have a very low reproductive rate, okay? And what that means is that they are highly vulnerable. And if we're going to be exploiting shark populations for food, for fun, whatever it might be, we have to be really careful of how we manage them, because once their population is depleted, it takes them a very long time to reach recovery. And one of the main reasons that sharks are in trouble is because of fishing. Okay, so fishing, both targeted fishing for food, for fins, for meat, their gills, all kinds of products. They're some of the most versatile of all marine products, marine animals. And the bycatch, the incidental catch of sharks, is driving shark populations globally towards extinction. Now, I don't know if any of you have heard of the IUCN Red List. This is a global effort to track endangerment in wild plants and animals. And the Red List, a recent Red List study identified that of all the species, the 1,200 species, nearly a third of them are facing extinction. They're ranked as either vulnerable, threatened, or critically endangered. And so we know why this is the case. It's high fishing pressure and that life history combined that really is putting sharks in hot water. No pun intended, really. All right, so that gives you a very, very high level overview of shark ecology and biology. Now I'm going to take a step closer to right here in our own backyard, right? What you see is the background here is the New York seascape. This is a map that actually WCS produced in conjunction with the with National Geographic Society. It is a double-sided map that depicts how much and how diverse the life it is in our water. So the backside has all kinds of animals that occur in our water. In this side, it shows how busy our waters with human activities, right? So that's the context. This is where we're talking about as being our seascape from Camhi, New Jersey to Montauk, New York, and Long Island Sound, from the edge of the continental shelf and all the way up into the tidal rivers. We have a pretty decent biodiversity of sharks right here. And more than 40 species of sharks, skates, and rays exist in our waters. And that even includes some of the largest animals, vertebrates in the ocean, including basking sharks and whale sharks, some of the fastest going ocean predators like blue sharks and mako sharks, deep sea predators, and here's a chain dogfish that can live, thousands of feet below the surface. Some of them are really important to fisheries like thresher sharks and mako sharks. So a high diversity right here in our own backyard. Now, I know we've been hearing lots and lots lately about sharks in our waters, and we can talk probably a little bit later about why that's the case. But I want to put this in context. Sharks have lived in these waters long before we have inhabited Long Island or New York or New Jersey. All right, there have been sharks plying the seas for millennia. They're one of the oldest family taxonomic groups, being around for over 350 million years. And they've been using these waters for a very long time. Not only that, but even from historic perspectives, we have data from human history about shark presence. For example, we know that there are shark remains in the middens that were found by the Lenape used sharks, millennia ago. We also know that there have been sharks documented, for example, here in the Gowanus Canal back in the 1800s. And we know that in the early 1900s, William Beebe, one of the first explorers in New York and of the deep ocean, described sharks in the Hudson Canyon in this book right here called Arcturus Adventure, and wrote about it in the New York Times. He wrote a lot of popular articles to familiarize New Yorkers with the waters in their backyard. And then finally, I want to point out this image here of, I'm going to go back. This image here of, this is from Bayshore, the Shark Mako tournament. Years ago, Mako sharks were very plentiful, that whatever was caught was brought to the deck, to the docks, and then tossed into the garbage. About 10 years ago, the Mako tournament gave up on Makos and started introducing a bluefish category because it's gotten so difficult to find Makos here in our water due to heavy fishing pressure. And that brings me to this sobering slide that of the 40 species that we have here in New York, about 72, or almost 3/4 of them, are facing some level of extinction. Now, it's important to recognize that in the US, we have some of the best shark fishery management in the world. And part of the reason why this number may be so high is because we have we know the populations, we know the status of them. And we also have been doing a lot to try to rein in fishing pressure and protect sharks. And we'll talk a little bit about that in just a bit. But my point here is that sharks need conservation attention. They need your my attention and focus. So let me tell you briefly about the New York Aquarium shark work. We have been, the New York Seascape program began in about 2010, and shortly thereafter, we started doing some local shark work. Our shark work approaches, takes 3 different approaches. What we call discover, or the research that we do in the field to help answer and address information gaps so that we better understand what we need to do to study and manage sharks. We also inspire the public to learn more, to appreciate that sharks are here and how vulnerable they are. And one of the ways we've done that is through this exhibit that we opened in 2018 at the New York Aquarium, all about sharks. And I certainly welcome you to come there and learn about the biology, the ecology, and the work we're doing in greater detail at the aquarium. And then we also work very much to protect sharks. So we're engaged heavily in various shark conservation actions from the local level all the way to the international level. And hopefully we'll have a little bit of time to talk a little bit about that. In terms of research, you can see sort of the objectives here. Our goal of research is sort of to answer the questions. What's here? When is it here? Why is it here? Where are they spending time? How are they moving about? What are they eating? What part of their life history depends on this? And then what are the risks that sharks face and how can we better help them? And so our research focuses on a couple of species, largely sand tigers, makos, blue sharks, a few other coastal species. But we're trying to collect as much information about them so that we can ensure that there's a safe place for wildlife in our very busy waters. All right, so we do that through the use of acoustic telemetry. We are, for example, putting acoustic tags that you can see up here. Can you see my arrow if I point to this? Yes, okay. So this is an acoustic tag that we can slip into sort of the abdomen of a shark that pings, and when the shark passes receivers that are actually distributed here, for example, right outside of and inside of Great South Bay. So this is where we've been doing our sand tiger research, which is one of the, I'll tell you about in just a second. And we're looking at these kinds of questions, their movements, their timing and their presence here. What habitat is associated with them? What is their health, developing a baseline? And over the last number of years, we've tagged 81 sand tigers, including 67 juveniles in Great South Bay, and an additional subadults or adults outside of the bay. And one of the major findings we have is that Great South Bay is a really important nursery habitat for this species. Young of the year and animals all the way from 1 to 5 years old come up from the south every summer and spend the summer feasting on the productivity in Great South Bay. And when they get older than about 5 years, and they come back to the same place, there's very strong site fidelity, they come back and spend time in the nearshore coastal waters. So these are subadults, and we're looking at these animals as well. And sand tigers are probably among the most studied animals in the area, and they're probably the most familiar to you because they're found in most aquariums, including ours in Coney Island. We're also using satellite telemetry to study the movements of other sharks like pelagic sharks, mako sharks, and blue sharks. These tags, whether it's a PSAT that only reports when it pops to the surface, or these towable spot tags that we put on the fins of these animals. The spot tags are for animals that come to the surface on a regular basis. Every time they come to the surface and that antenna breaks the water, we get a signal popping up to satellites and then down to our computers, and it enables us to make these kinds of tracks, all right? These kind of tags are only good for animals that surface a lot. The PSATs are ones like sand tigers who spend all their time under the ocean, and we set a time that these tags will be released from the animal. They'll pop up, and then all the data gets dumped to the satellite and back to our computers. And these tags allow us to understand the migration of movements, the daily activity through depth and temperature, and also about conservation needs. So one of the things that we found with our tagged makos was that many of them, up to at least 25% of our tags, got taken by fishermen. So, and returned to us, fortunately, by the same fishermen. Sharks in our waters have to go through a gauntlet of fishing activity, nets, hooks, lines. And as a result, this kind of data helps us figure out where those interactions are, what we can do to reduce them. All right, briefly mention that another project we're getting started is the use of eDNA to understand the distribution of vertebrates across the entire New York Bight. So this will include sharks and help us zero in on important habitat for sharks, but this is meant to be for all vertebrates. And we're doing this for all vertebrates in the entire New York Bight. And we also were recently funded to do a similar kind of project in the waters all around New York City. We haven't started that yet, but stay tuned. I think it's very exciting work to really help augment all this research, other research going on, and the kind of trawl surveys and stuff that Chris is very familiar with. So another way to figure out what's here, but only by taking a water sample and doing genetic analysis in the lab. So it doesn't require us to handle the sharks or to tag them. All right, so briefly, I would love to be able to talk to you a lot more about all the conservation policy and outreach we do. We work through a very large consortium of aquariums who are focusing on improving the conservation status of sharks, largely by understanding their role in aquarium. How do we, the husbandry of sharks, all right? And we are doing actually research in our aquarium to figure out how do we maybe do captive breeding of sand tiger sharks. We worked with a group called the Aquarium Conservation Partnership, a group of about 22 aquariums across the country who are engaging increasingly in various fisheries and ocean conservation issues, including engaging their visitors and their local public in terms of proving the conservation status of sharks. And a lot of this work gets done with students within the aquarium. This is the aquarium setting. This is our Hudson Canyon, the edge tank. And we do a lot of work like speaking and outreach, et cetera, to try to get the public to understand that sharks are an important part of the ecosystem. They help to keep our oceans healthy and vibrant, and we really need them here. And their populations have been declining tremendously. And that includes through loss of habitat. So one of the other activities that we are very heavily engaged in right now, and I can share a link with you about this, is trying to get the Hudson Canyon, the biggest canyon off of the whole eastern seaboard, that's right here in our own waters. We're working to get this designated as a national marine sanctuary so that we can channel additional research and awareness and education, et cetera, into understanding how these habitats are critical to the well-being of sharks and virtually, almost all other species that are using our waters. And with that, I'm just gonna say, I wish I had a lot more time to talk to you about all that work. I would love to have you be partner with us on some of these things. You can go to this, I'll put these in the chat in a moment, but you can go to this website if you want to get on our mailing list and learn how you can do things like help us protect the Hudson Canyon and also help us do improve fisheries management so we can reverse the tide here in New York and elsewhere for sharks, bring these populations back to healthy levels, and we need your help to do that. So please join us, and I thank you. I have to say it takes a village. I don't do this alone. I have a phenomenal team that I work with, both within the aquarium and outside. And so thanks to all of you to help, and to all of you who are interested in doing something for sharks. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Mary. That was fantastic. Okay, all right, Greg, do you want to share your slides?
Okay.
All right, great. We can see those.
Okay. All right. So thank you also for this opportunity to share the little bit about our organization and what we're doing to try and learn, as you've learned from, as you heard from Mary, a lot of the similar types of questions. I feel very proud and fortunate to work with Mary's organization and Chris's organization here specifically on Long Island, as well as some that are in different states. My name's Greg Metzger. My job description, or my title at the South Fork Natural History Museum's Shark Research and Education Program is the Chief Field Coordinator. And basically, what my role in our organization is to help organize and conduct the field work. Our work through the South Fork Natural History Museum started only in 2018. And there were 4 of us that were college friends at Long Island University that kept in touch when we graduated in the late 90s. And each of us, as we started to become adults, we went to different areas of marine science or in natural history. Our director of the museum, Frank Lovetto, he's currently the museum's executive director, and the museum is the organization that we do our work out of. Chris Paparo, who I'm sure many of you are familiar with, is from Fish Guy Photos. He's our professional photographer, and he does a tremendous amount of writing, and he's sort of our public relations person. Myself, the job that pays the bills, none of the people that you're going to hear me talk about other than Frank are paid by the museum to do any of the work that we do through the museum. It's sort of been a labor of love with the hope that we would be able to have something or to do research that people would value, and we're starting to see that happen. So and then our lead scientist, Dr. Toby Curtis, who is a NOAA fisheries biologist. So the 4 of us were college friends, and so Toby's the one that kind of started to plant the seed. I had summers off I teach marine science and aquaculture at Southampton High School and was an avid fisherman. I was able to purchase a boat and went out and started fishing. I started catching sharks recreationally, and being a marine scientist and hearing that, nothing is known about sharks, nothing's known about sharks. I knew that every shark I was catching and releasing was data swimming away for somebody. And so as Toby sort of got his master's degree and then started working in the NOAA fisheries, and we kept in touch, and I was starting to catch more and more sharks and various species that Mary had alluded to and showed. Toby was like, man, he says, there's some pretty strong evidence through the years that the New York Bight is a potential nursery for great white sharks. And I'm like, what are you talking about? I said, you mean there's baby great white sharks swimming around right out here? And he's like, there's some pretty strong evidence. Yes. And he says, if you could figure out a way to catch them, he said, with any sort of consistency, we might be able to, generate some funding that we could get some tags, which Mary explained, to put on there and start to answer the questions that Mary was talking about, only with baby white sharks. And he says, if that could happen, there's not really anything known about that life history, that early, less than 1 year old white shark in the Atlantic. And so I was like, well, game on, this is fantastic. And so we were able to go out and catch and tag our first baby white shark with a satellite tag in 2015. And then we had OSearch come and help us for a couple of years, and they were able to teach me a lot and my team a lot about the nuances to catch baby white sharks. And so from there, we went from the first one tagged ever in the Atlantic Ocean with a satellite tag in 2015. We have over 30 tagged now. But in trying to catch and target those baby white sharks, we started to catch the various other species of sharks that are out there. So the WCS, as Mary mentioned, is focused on the sand tiger sharks and the blue sharks and the mako sharks. And, having the fortune to work with them through the years, resources are extremely limited. And so it made no sense whatsoever for the South Fork Natural History Museum to, target and ask the same sorts of questions for sand tigers, mako sharks, and blue sharks when there's all these other species that are completely understudied. So we of course, focused most of our time on the baby white shark, and we also caught the common thresher shark. Since then, since we have so many of the baby white sharks tagged so far, we've been able to acquire some funding to allow us to now start expanding the questions that we're asking to other species of sharks. So our shark species list now is, of course, the baby white shark and the common thresher shark. but we've also started to put these pop-off satellite tags on sandbar sharks, dusky sharks, more recently that have shown up in numbers enough to catch spinner sharks. And I'm super excited that this field season has been tremendously rewarding to us. And I caught and was able to tag a black tip shark this year. So the smallness and intimacy of the museum allows us to sort of adapt what Mother Nature gives us on any particular year. And so I'm super happy and grateful to the museum to give us that autonomy, really basically based on Toby's expertise and what I'm seeing in the field to come up with a game plan for a particular field season, or adapt if Mother Nature's given us some really great opportunities. In addition, so let's see here. My advancements. Let's see if we can advance. Where are? Oh, there we go. Okay. So yeah, so this is one of the baby white sharks. So everyone that starts to learn or have a conversation, it's like, oh man, how strong are the baby white sharks, and they're how big are they? And I said, it's not the size and the power of these animals. Typically, most of the ones that we get are around 40 pounds. A big one might be 80 pounds. They're about the size of a 4-year-old. I have a 4-year-old daughter, so that's about the size of the white sharks that we catch. To be honest with you, I have no interest in dealing with any white shark larger than about 100 pounds. So I said, it's not the size and strength that's impressive. It's the fact that we and our work has actually confirmed that yes, the New York Bight is a nursery for white sharks. So the only I think there are only 3 that have been defined in the world. 2 of them are in the Pacific Ocean, and the New York Bight is the South Shore of Long Island, Montauk to Cape May, New Jersey is the 3rd one, and the only one confirmed in the Atlantic so far. So Long Island is a super duper special place, regardless of what organization you work for, certainly in the shark world. And so this is one of our most shining, defining moments, to be able to have identified or confirmed the nursery that had been suggested for decades. So in addition to the satellite tags that Mary had shown you and was able to explain, we also have been fortunate to secure funding for a CATS cam. And so CATS stands for Customized Animal Tracking Solutions. And this is a company that basically builds tags to go on animals that allow you to track their movements in real time out in the water. And it also comes with a high definition camera. So there are 12 different sensors that are in the tag. And so what we affix it to the dorsal fin. This is a spinner shark, one of those spinner sharks that we caught and tagged with our CATS cam. You see the spinner shark's nose in the front. And we were able to, upon releasing the spinner shark, you're literally capturing the acceleration of the shark in 3 dimensions. You're capturing the angle of movement in 3 dimensions, the temperature of the water, the depth of the water, and the computer in the tag is recording that. We have it set at 20 times per second. So on a 24-hour deploy, which is what we typically will do, we get millions and millions of data sets and information about the habitat usage and swimming behavior, as well as amazing high definition video from the back of the shark. So our spinner sharks have definitely given us the money shots, as we call them. Certainly seeing a shark joining a school of its buddies out in nice clear water is pretty amazing footage. So we have successful CATS cam deployments on a couple spinner sharks and a few thresher sharks. We are excited to get the CATS cam out on more animals this year. The unfortunate part about the CATS cam is we have to get it back in order to get any information. Unlike the satellite tags, when they release from the animal, they will relay a portion of the data that they've collected to the satellite, whether you get the tag back or not. If you can get the tag back, you can get a lot more high data from it. I'm not sure what Mary's tags are programmed, but for our tags, they stay on the animal 28 days and record water temperature and depth every 10 seconds for 28 days. If we only get the satellite data, we get temperature and depth for 5 minutes, every 5 minutes for 28 days. But if we're able to get the tag back, because it washes up on the beach or somebody finds it and returns it to us, we can get that 10-second resolution. So with the CATS cam, though, we have to get it back. And so, you know, we have no idea where these sharks are going to swim, where they're going to be 24 hours later when the tag releases. And so I need a weather window, not only, you know, to have a good weather window to catch the shark, but if we put the CATS cam on, the next day needs to be a good weather window, because this particular spinner shark in a 24-hour period was 23 miles offshore. So my boat is not that big, and so to travel 23 miles offshore in nasty rough weather to try and find a very brutally expensive tag is difficult. And you have to find the tag in the water as the waves are splashing around, stuff like that. So timing and you know, catching an animal and having a good day and just timing and stuff like that, we haven't had that window to deploy CATS yet this year. But we're super excited to get them out again this year. And how are we doing on time? Ooh, all right, I'm doing all right. Lastly, if you are interested in coming to get a lot more information about what we typically do, and specifically about how our field season is going this year, we are having an open free event to the public at the South Fork Natural History Museum, which is located in Bridgehampton on the Bridgehampton Turnpike. The event's going to happen August 10th at 5 p.m. and we have a panel discussion of various contributors. So Dr. Curtis will be there. I'll be there with some of the other boat captains. We have partnered with Stony Brook University, the Peterson Lab, to help with some of the offshore wind work that needs to be done, to acoustically tag animals to see how they interact in the area where the windmills are going to be going in. So it's very exciting. We have a tremendous successful field season so far. We've caught more animals this year than I've caught probably in the last 2 years combined. So lastly, a huge contributor to the success we've had is, you know, when we were studying white sharks and trying to catch them, the joke everybody said was, you know, you need a bigger boat. And my response was never, yeah, I hear you. It was always, I don't need a bigger boat, I need more boats. Bigger boat wouldn't really do me any good for what we look to do, but more boats on the water trying to target and catch animals just makes success better. And I'm so proud to say that we have 2 additional boats, both really great friends of mine that have worked their butts off to learn what we do in safe handling and how to target and handle the sharks along the vessel. And so they single-handedly, so I don't need a bigger boat, I need more boats. And two people, Walter and Matt, have definitely stepped up to do that. So as Mary said, it does take a village. There's a lot of people that work their butts off to help us be successful and learn what we've been able to learn in a super short period of time that we've been out there. So thank you again, Emily, for this opportunity to showcase our work. And I look forward to answering any questions you have and hopefully get to see some of you at our event August 10th.
Thank you so much, Greg. That was fantastic. Always great to have some video footage as well. All right, Chris, do you want to share your screen?
Sure.
You guys able to see that? Great. Well, good evening, everyone. My name is Chris Scott. I'm a biologist at New York State Department of Environmental Conservation. Specifically, I'm with the Division of Marine Resources over in Kings Park. My work focuses on coastal sharks and a few other things, but I get to work with these amazing groups that Mary and Greg and a few other people work with to study these animals on Long Island. And we're really fortunate as New Yorkers to have these researchers working here on this amazing ecosystem. So hoping that's coming across to you as they present it. But yeah, I want to thank CTUC for having me present today. I'm going to touch on the sightings that we've been seeing this summer off Long Island's coast, a little bit on sharks and public safety, some fishery management updates specific to sharks, and I'm going to touch on our salvage program and explain what that is. So shark sightings, right? This is the topic of the summer right now. You see it all over the news, reading the newspaper. Everyone wants to know why there's been an increase in shark sightings this summer. There's no one thing that's causing this. Like everything else in life, it's a combination of things. I'll break it down as best as I can. We are seeing, locally abundant food sources near shore specifically. So on this background image here, this is a satellite photograph from last July, a little over a year old, of Jones Beach State Park. Those little specks on the beach, you can see my cursor, maybe not. Those are the beach goers. Those dark blotches out in the water, those are each schools of Atlantic menhaden, or locally they're called bunker fish. So this is not something unique to Jones Beach. This is something we've been seeing coastwide in New York, from the Rockaways out to Montauk for the last maybe 3 or 4 years now. This is a food source for not just sharks, but striped bass, bluefish, osprey, whales, seals. So the whole ecosystem, marine ecosystem, thrives on these forage fish. It's an abundant food source for them. So other food sources specifically for sharks, back in the 1970s, the federal government started protecting marine mammals, and part of that, seals were protected as part of this. Their populations have been increasing more north of here, like Massachusetts. But some of you might have noticed over the last few years, we're seeing more and more seals out east off the Forks, North Fork, and Montauk area. So their populations are expanding southward, and we're seeing more seals locally. This is really only pertinent to the adult white sharks. Up in Massachusetts, they have adult white sharks that will feed on them almost every summer. We don't get those too frequently in New York. Adult white sharks migrate from down south where they overwinter, so they pass Long Island in the spring and the fall. So it's not a huge concern at the moment, but it's something we're keeping our eye on. Another food source, we have shipping lanes off of New York Bight, where all of our goods come into port in New York. And every once in a while, unfortunately, a large whale will get hit by one of the shipping containers, and the carcass will float on the surface. This is a huge source of free, fat and protein for sharks, and it will attract white sharks and other animals to the carcass to feed. So those are pretty infrequent, but it can happen. It's been seen along our coast. But the main driver is these forage fish schools that we have of Atlantic menhaden. We also have herring and mackerel and squid off our coast, all of which are great menu items for sharks. The other thing that's driving increase in shark sightings, we have terrific, which Mary touched on, coastwide shark management for state waters. We've protected certain species from harvest since 2008. These sharks are managed in species groups, and the specific species groups that I'm talking about are called the prohibited species. Locally, these are our sandbar sharks, sand tigers, duskies, white sharks, those kind of animals. So they're all protected from harvest or fishing activities. Although a stock assessment hasn't really been completed for any of these species except dusky recently, there are some anecdotal evidence from commercial shark fishermen down south that species like sandbar shark are improving with time, but there's no hard evidence yet or data. But there are protections for certain animals to allow them to help protect them, basically. But like Mary said, it takes them a long time to recover because of their life history. The other thing that's changing in New York is the habitat, specifically the thermal habitat. We're seeing thermally shorter winters and longer and warmer summers if you look at the water temperature. So the thermal habitat in New York is becoming more favorable for southern shark species that we did not see in years past. And some examples of those are the black tip shark and the spinner shark that Greg was mentioning. So we now see them in New York, whereas maybe 10 years ago, it would be very infrequently that we would see them here. And that's solely due to water temperature and the abundant food sources. So that's one half of the reason why we're seeing more sharks. The other half is, sharks have existed in our waters for millions of years, but the ability to view and share images of these animals has only existed for a short period of time. So new technology like drones, right? Everyone and their brother has a drone now and they're flying it over the water. We can now fly these drones over these bunker schools and see what's feeding on them. So sharks are becoming easier to spot on these schools. And on top of that, we now have social media and cell phones, so we can share these images and videos instantly with everyone. That was something that didn't exist until pretty recently. So the ecosystem is changing and our technology is changing, which is all adding up to increased shark sightings. So about 2017, 16, I kept getting emails of shark pictures. I was like, yep, I would identify it. That's really cool. And I wanted to think of something better we could do with these images. So I developed this web app, and it's the official organized record of shark sightings in New York waters. So anyone can take a picture of the shark they see, record the date, time, and location, and then send it in through the Shark Spotter program. And it'll be recorded in that database. We have a simple web form for submissions. You just follow that link in the bottom left there, and you'll lead right to it. And we could post that in the chat later on. These are just a couple of quick examples of some Shark Spotter submissions over the years. Basking shark that happened to wash up dead, unfortunately. In the top left, we had a smooth hammerhead in the top right, a juvenile white shark in the bottom left, and a spinner shark in the bottom right. So we get data on location, month, time of day, and obviously species. So we're getting more information on the distribution of these animals as these submissions come in. So great citizen science project for everyone to participate in. I want to touch on sharks and public safety now. So negative interactions with sharks are actually pretty rare in New York. We've had 12 unprovoked incidents in New York over the last 100 years, all of which were non-fatal. So these were bites that caused injuries, but did not cause death, right? So like I said before, sharks have been here since before the dinosaurs, right? Long Island is 120-mile long coastline with right next to the largest city in the US, which has over 20 million inhabitants, right? So the statistics, the number of sharks out there and the number of humans on the beach, New York really doesn't have that many negative interactions. And if you look down south a little further, I mean, North Carolina has had 73 incidents since 1935. South Carolina has had 107 incidents since 1837. And Florida leads the way on the East Coast with 895 incidents since 1882. So just to keep perspective on things. The incidents in New York, they're generally associated with swimmers bumping into sharks and water with low visibility, and generally near schools of those bunker. So more often than not, it's the shark doesn't want to be near you, and you don't want to be near the shark, and it's kind of the shark's trying to get away from you, and they bump into you, kind of thing. So we developed some imagery to help the public with minimizing these interactions. The main point I want to get across here is that, I mean, most of us right now, we're sitting on an island attached to the Atlantic Ocean, right? And that Atlantic Ocean is a wild and natural marine ecosystem. This is it's not a, let me rephrase that. So if you went into the woods in Alaska, you might expect that you would encounter a bear maybe. So the same thing is true for a wild marine environment, right? You could potentially encounter a shark. So humans assume that risk whenever they enter any wild environment. And the best thing you could do for your safety is to adapt your behavior to minimize potential interactions with sharks and to reduce your overall risk. So I'm just going to go through some of the top ones that we have listed on our website. Some of these might be obvious to you and some might not be, and it's great for everyone just to review these before they head out to the beach. You don't want to be anywhere near a seal or a colony of seals at any time, especially in the spring or fall in New York. Again, this is when adult white sharks are moving through. And more often than not, it's a misidentification from underwater. A human on a surfboard looks a lot like a seal going through the water. More pertinent to what's going on right now, you should always avoid areas with schools of fish or diving seabirds. So those dark blotches that we saw at Jones Beach, those are all schools of Atlantic menhaden. You shouldn't be swimming anywhere near that. So if you're on the beach and you look out and you see a dark splotch out in the water, maybe some splashing on the surface, let that move through before you decide to go in and join the bunker. It's never a good idea to go swimming with them. Any marine predator has the advantage at dusk, dawn, and nighttime, including fish. And sharks are the same way. They're going to use their biological advantage to hunt during these times. And it's also the most likely time they'll misidentify their prey. So you don't want to be in that environment for any chances of that happening. Murky water, the water is really turbid and you can't really see your feet and you're standing in waist deep water. That's not really a great situation for you to be in. Again, we're trying to reduce risk of misidentification, shark bumping into you, that kind of thing. On that same train of thought, if you're swimming in or paddling or surfing in a group, it's less likely that the shark's going to misidentify you. There's obviously something going on in the area where there's a bunch of humans, and they can identify that better than if you're out in the deeper water by yourself. And always, no matter what, you're going to want to follow the lifeguards' instructions because they are trained professionals and they look at the water more than anyone else, and they know when something looks different. So you should always be looking at the flags, listening to the lifeguards' whistles, that kind of thing. Now I'm going to go into the shark fisheries management updates. This is the primary role of my job, is fisheries management. So this has been a hot topic lately. That species group I mentioned before of our prohibited species, these, and Mary mentioned them as well, in the sense that they have life histories which are they're slow growing, they're long lived, they sexually mature at late ages, they produce few young. So they're really sensitive to fisheries removals, and it takes a long time for them to recover. In the case of the dusky shark, for example, NOAA has the target to rebuild their population 85 years from now, and that's if everything goes smoothly. So it takes a really long time for these animals to recover. Take or possession of our prohibited species in New York has been banned since 2010. And so that means it's illegal to fish for or harvest any prohibited shark species. Locally, the prohibited species in New York, and like on the sign on the left side here, are the sandbar, the dusky, or the sand tiger sharks. These are the only sharks surf fishermen will really encounter in New York. So anyone that's targeting sharks from shore is usually going to land a prohibited shark species. So we've been trying to increase outreach with regulatory signs, the one you see on the left at beach access points. We've improved our website. We've done email and social media on this, really trying to get the word out on that these species are protected and you shouldn't be fishing for them. But as you see on the screen, this activity is still going on, and it's actually becoming more popular, unfortunately. Anglers are using tactics such as using drones to deploy baits further offshore where they might encounter more of these animals. They will use kayaks to kayak their baits offshore while someone stands on shore with the rod and reel. They do awful things like holding the shark's mouth open, dragging them up to dry sand and putting them up on a gaff, and then they release them with the thought that the animal will survive. Unfortunately, some of these animals might swim for a day or two and then wash up a couple miles down the beach. So the problem right now is the way our rules have been written, it's difficult for DEC law enforcement to prosecute these cases. They really have to be on scene to see the activity. With the resources we have, we can't cover all of Long Island to do that. And a lot of the time, these anglers they can say they're fishing for legitimate species like bluefish or striped bass, and the officers have a really tough time making a case. So what we're doing as an agency right now is trying to build better regulations and put them in place to give our law enforcement the tools they need to prosecute these individuals that knowingly are targeting illegal shark species. So I'm just going to review some of that real quick and try not to get too boring. But we're looking to change some language on what gear and methods shore-based anglers can use. So a lot of these people are using large shark hooks, like really large, and they use long wire leader, maybe 4 feet long, like piano wire. So we're trying to prohibit the use of those large shark hooks from shore and limit the leader to only a foot long, so that bluefish and striped bass anglers can still fish and do what they're doing, but limit the shark fishing activity from shore. We want to prohibit anglers from chumming from shore. It's not really great for anyone to start chumming on shore, other than those shore-based shark anglers. We want to limit shore-based anglers from deploying bait hooks by any means other than casting with a rod and reel. So no more drones, no more kayaking out baits, that kind of thing. And then the other part of this regulation would deal with handling and release. So those prohibited shark species would have to be immediately released if they're captured even by accident. Sharks would have to stay in the water during release. You can't drag them up on dry land, hang them from a gaff, that kind of thing. We're going to require that recreational anglers fishing for sharks have on them something that they can cut the hook or the leader with really quick to promote a quick release on the animal. And we're going to require that they take every precaution to ensure the maximum probability of survival of any shark that will be released. So no more holding the jaw open, flexing your muscles next to the shark, that kind of thing. The shark has to be released immediately for their survival. So we're in the midst of this rulemaking now, and likely late this summer, 2022. There's going to be a public comment period where anyone in the public can write in support or against this rule, and that's the official way that we will tally our public comment on this. So if you're interested, please keep an eye out for that. If you on DEC's website, there's a way to be part of the email chain there, and you'll get updates on topics like this. And if no substantial revisions need to be made on this rule, it will likely be in place by next summer, 2023. Finally, I just want to finish up with our shark salvage program. So we work with all these great groups, Greg's group, Mary's group, Stony Brook University, NOAA Fisheries, to respond to reports of dead sharks that wash up on the beach. And the reason we do this, like Greg said, every animal is a potential data source, right? If we're able to collect these animals, not only do we get information about timing of what species are where, but we also get information, we're able to collect samples from these animals that you can't collect from a live shark. They're already dead, unfortunately, so we can take samples like their vertebrae for aging work. We can take tissue samples for genetics or isotope work. We can obviously look inside the animal to see if it any signs of disease or fisheries interactions like hooks, parasites, things like that. So we work with a wide group, a network of researchers on this project to get them samples to facilitate their studies and improve overall shark science in New York. But this is not something easy to do because Long Island's so big and these incidents occur at any time of day, any day of the week. So we really work with a lot of different groups. Greg Metzger specifically helps us out on the South Fork when these incidents happen. He'll help us collect the sharks and necropsy the animals. Pictured in the middle there, that was an employee of the Wildlife Conservation Society who, pathologist, a shark pathologist. She helped train us on how to open these animals up and what we should be looking for. And we're super grateful for that experience, and it's really helped the program. So if you ever see an animal on the beach, you can help us by reporting it to us through the website or this phone number here. You just need to record the coordinates, like where you are, date, time. Pictures are always great, and size, and if you can guess the species, that helps too. I should mention that we also respond to Atlantic sturgeon that wash up. They're an endangered species of fish that live in New York, and we do collect a lot of valuable data on them too. So we appreciate any information on that as well. So I want to thank you guys for listening to me talk about what we do here at the DEC as it relates to sharks, and we could take any questions.
All right, great. Thank you so much, Chris, and everyone for presenting. Okay, so I know we definitely have a few questions. Okay. So one of the first questions we have here is about the DEC fishing regulations, that basically allowing some of those sharks that are critically endangered or threatened to still be fished for in New York. And maybe why is this? So I saw that some folks definitely want to touch on that already. So please feel free to jump in and answer that.
So critically endangered or threatened, so IUCN endangered, I assume you're talking about shortfin mako.
Yeah, so hammerheads, ocean white tips, threshers are some of the ones this attendee mentioned, but I'm sure any, you know.
I'll touch on shortfin mako right now just because it's a hot topic. They're managed internationally, and the stock assessment committee found that they're overfished and overfishing, and they are also going to have a long time period to recovery. They mandated the closure of the commercial and recreational shortfin mako fisheries. So our federal government, NOAA Fisheries, implemented that in federal waters. So that's 300 to 200 miles offshore. The state management body from Maine to Florida, they, for their fisheries management plan, implemented complementary measures. So all the states now have to go do their own regulations and prohibit the commercial and recreational shortfin mako fisheries. And New York is in that process right now, and we have some good movement on it, and we should see some results real soon.
Great, thank you. Mary, do you want to jump in at all?
Yeah, I was just going to say, yes, thanks for bringing that up, Chris, because I think shortfin makos, which are the iconic shark here in New York, really have plummeted terribly and are going to take, probably decades to recover, even with this retention ban that we're going to be putting in place. So it's pretty a pretty sad story. But I also want to point out that IUCN red listing is often done on a global basis, and sometimes it's not done on a local basis. And so some of the populations that we have here actually may be in better shape than the global status. So for example, sand tiger sharks on a global basis are considered to be exceptionally endangered, right? I mean, they're highly endangered. And yet our population here is relatively stable. And that's because we have relatively good management in place to reduce fishing pressure. Now, Chris just pointed out that it's not good enough, right? There's still folks here who are targeting these animals from beaches and they are not supposed to be. So there is a little bit of a disconnect there, but there's also management that makes sure that whatever fishing does take place is meant to be sustainable. And a lot of these sharks will no longer be allowed to be traded internationally for the fin and meat trade because those fisheries are not sustainable. We are continuing to ratchet down on some of the fishing pressure for these more threatened species.
Just to throw in my 2 cents as far as what I'm seeing in the field, it's in a lot of ways I think a good story, and it helps to just add to what I've been seeing in the field since I've been out fishing basically in the same areas using the same techniques for the years that I've been doing that. Is a lot of the sharks that we're catching are juveniles,
I
are
think
baby
you
years.
paused. Oh, okay.
Same.
I think you're pausing a bit, Greg.
Yeah, it must be my Wi-Fi then, maybe. So we've been seeing a lot of juvenile sharks and catching a lot of juvenile sharks year after year after year. And so, the babies that we're catching this year are not going to be the same babies that we catch next year when they're the same size. So these are new baby sharks that are being recruited to the population. So Long Island is a very great place to be a baby shark, and we're seeing that more and more. So you can't have adults without babies. So it's a good thing.
Yeah, that's a great perspective on that. Thank you. Just kind of jumping off of that real quick, we did get a question also. I'm not sure if any of you know, is there parity in the different states' regulations? I saw, Mary, you answered that briefly. Do you want to touch on that a little bit?
Yeah, there is a effort to manage these fisheries across states because, as we know, these are highly migratory species, right? Sharks are not just staying in New York waters, and the sand tiger sharks are coming up from North Carolina seasonally in the summer to spend time in our waters, then go back in the winter. Animals are moving from different places for reproduction, for feeding, etc. So if only one state were to manage or protect a species, that could easily be done by other states not doing so. So there is an effort through the Atlantic States Marine Fisheries Commission to help manage coastal sharks through the highly migratory species division of NOAA for the more pelagic and oceanic sharks to make sure that there's consistency. And then there also needs to be consistency between what the states are doing in the 0 to 3 miles offshore, and then with what's happening in terms of management from 3 to 200 miles, which are federal waters. So there is a strong effort to do that. In some cases, some states, if they have a fishery, are allowed to take more of a given species than another. And that is all negotiated through our fishery management authorities.
Wonderful, thank you. So another question was, how common are some different shark species down that there's warming water, such as bull sharks or tiger sharks?
I mean, from my perspective, I have not caught or seen a bull shark or a tiger shark. So just in terms of someone, again, who's out there, Chris can possibly talk more about whether there have been confirmed from my field perspective, have not caught or seen any.
So those two species are found very, very infrequently in New York waters. You'll hear people on the news or the media say there was tiger sharks. Often that's a confusion. They meant to say sand tiger shark. It's important to differentiate. A sand tiger is frequent species found here in New York and minimal threat to bathers, whereas a tiger shark is a little bit more of a threat, and they're found further south. Really don't occur in New York State waters, and there's not many records of them occurring here. I mean, I know back in the 70s and 80s, they could be caught offshore, far offshore every once in a while, but it's not a common occurrence. Things could change with climate change. Maybe 10, 20 years from now, it could be different, but right now, they're not frequently found here.
Thank you. Okay, another question we have is, why don't we find shark teeth on the beach? You know, in other states like South Carolina, you can find them.
Good question. I don't have the answer for that one. I don't know.
Yeah, that is an interesting one. I've been down in the Carolinas myself and I found a bunch, so that is kind of interesting, especially flung it. Great.
Yeah, I guess I'm gonna try shutting my video here.
Okay, yeah, that might help a bit.
So that may help with the audio. My feeling is that it has to do more with distribution back in like dinosaur times. You know, that's I'm just throwing it out there. It's more of just something to think about. Somebody else has. It's not coming from anywhere other than just my sharks and shark teeth. Back in dinosaur time, that there was fossilized and where in New York waters they weren't here back when they were there. But
yeah, and the other thing to consider, Mary touched on it, most of the, if not all the species of shark that we have in New York are migratory, so they're not here 12 months of the year, so they're moving through, or they're seasonally resident here, whereas in Florida or the Carolinas, you have some year-round residents shedding teeth, so more likely to find teeth down there.
Great. Okay. So who would someone report to if they did see inappropriate fishing, for sharks?
So the best individuals to contact are our DEC environmental conservation officers. I can give you the number. I'll post it in the chat box before we're done here. I don't have it right offhand, but I will post that now. I'll look it up for you. I should note that you should never attempt to approach anyone that's doing anything illegal. The best thing to do is note the license plate or description of the individual, where they are at the time, and the officers can go check it out on their own.
Great, thank you. And we'll also probably send a follow-up email out to all Zoom registrants with this information as well. Okay, another question. Wesley, our 6-year-old son would like to know why sharks might wash up on the beach.
Sure, that's a great question. So sharks, like any other animal, have natural causes of mortality. That could be parasitism, it could be any other source of disease, organ failure, but they also interact with commercial fishing gear and recreational fishing gear. Some of those examples are commercial trawlers that are out there fishing for groundfish like fluke. They pick up a shark, they don't really have a market for it, and they'll throw it back overboard. Sometimes the shark does not survive. A recreational angler might encounter a shark. The shark might have swallowed the hook wrong, causing a mortal injury. And when the animal is released, it might it might wash up later on. So there's all kinds of different things that can impact the health of the shark.
Great, thank you. Another question is, just with the thoughts of climate change that we talked about already, some of these bull and tiger sharks or even other species, if they were to come up later in time, do you know if these species, like our resident species and new species, would coexist, or would they possibly push our resident species out?
So that's a real big hypothetical. My assumption would be that they would coexist, because unless there's direct predation of one shark species on another, that would cause resident sharks to move. But that does happen, but not as frequently as the movies might portray. So my thinking is that it wouldn't really change the distribution too much.
Yeah, I would just sort of agree with Chris. I mean, again, based on what I'm seeing out there, we may be targeting the same bunker school for hours, and we could catch not only multiple individuals of the same species, but also as many as 3 and 4 different species. So you have right now currently 3 to 4, just from my experience, there may be more. Certainly we're not catching every shark that's on that bunker school, but it's not uncommon to catch 2 to 3 different species of sharks feeding on the exact same bunker school at the exact same time. So something like a tiger shark, if they were to move into our waters, tiger sharks definitely feed on other sharks. But sharks always, sharks have a hard life out there, and they're going to take the easiest route. Is it easier for a tiger shark to chase down another shark to eat, or is it easier for them to chase down the massive schools of bunker that are out there? I mean, is it easier to, eat bumblebees, or is it easier to eat the flowers? Where is your energy better spent? So I think if, we did have a massive influx of tiger sharks that are typically found eating other sharks, there's a lot of bunker out there. But it is, like Chris said, really a hypothetical sort of question, debatable question over some root beers at the table.
And I would just also add that there is so much uncertainty on the effect that climate and warming is going to have on our local ecosystems. The sad part is that it probably will dissociate a lot of the existing predator-prey relationships, because some of the prey that our current sharks are dependent on may leave, and vice versa. Others may come in. So there is so much uncertainty there that it's really hard to know how our fauna is going to change. So it's one of the reasons why we really need to invest in long-term monitoring of these ecosystems, to have a really good baseline right now, so that we can help project and predict those changes to inform management and protection and conservation.
Great, thank you so much. Okay, we have another question from our colleague, Mike Bettini. I'm just going to allow him to talk here. Okay, Mike, you should be unmuted. Yes,
okay.
Go ahead.
Thank you very much. Great program. So I'm actually a full-time ocean lifeguard in East Hampton Town, and this is very timely because there's a lot of information going around shark attacks on the beach. And I just want, there were the state's poster about what species of sharks are not supposed to be fished for and caught. I think it listed 3 different species, but there were no ID features. And I know for me, shark ID is kind of tricky, with the exception of a handful of species. There's a rumor going around this weekend that a bull shark was either attacked someone or was identified on the east end of Long Island. And I don't know who is responsible for that ID. But my main point here is that There are two groups of professionals that are on the beach all summer long that are a good source of information and data collection. One is the ocean lifeguards, and the other is the piping plover and least turn monitors. And they could really be recruited to provide, for example, just a quick photograph and send it in to someone of a shark washed up on the beach. And in terms of the lifeguards, I think a lot of us could really benefit from some kind of educational program in terms of perhaps identification of sharks or answering questions from the general public. This last week, a trawl must have went through on the East End. So there's the beach is littered with smooth dogfish, very shark-like looking. Most people think it's a shark pup, and getting a lot of questions about that with all the news that's going on. Is it okay if I go in the water? So I think particularly the ocean lifeguards, it'd be good to put a little program together to educate us about sharks and how to handle where really the interface between the beachgoers, the general public, and the various municipalities we work for. But great program, really, really, really good. Thank you.
Thanks
Yeah,
so
Mike,
much, Mike.
There's some great ideas that you had there. Overall, I think your main message is outreach needs to be beefed up a little bit, and we're trying with our website and our partners. And education on shark species is difficult, like you said. We do have ID guides on the website. So the reason those 3 species were chosen for that regulatory sign is because those are really the 3 species that you're only going to see on the beach if you're angling for them. As far as outreach to the lifeguards, I agree. That's a great source of information. New York State DEC and New York State Parks actually have hosted 2 meetings now with beach agencies, lifeguards from Montauk out to the Rockaways. I'm not sure if you or anyone in your agency attended that, but we want to reach out to groups like yours who feel like there needs to be more attention to lifeguards. So we can get in contact with you, Mike, or you have my contact information, and we'll set something up with you.
Okay, great. Yeah, I did forward this on to my cohort here, East Hampton Town Volunteer Ocean Rescue. So hopefully there's a bunch of us on this Zoom. But again, thanks. Really great program.
Thank you.
Yeah, just again, to throw SOFO's name in the hat, of course, we would be more than happy to help facilitate, proper identification in that. I can tell you that unless you have the shark in hand, so unless it's washed up on the beach, and like Chris suggested, we absolutely need pictures in order to identify. There's a lot of shark identifiers out there, but a lot of them, from my experience in looking at the pictures, and are not good at identifying the sharks for a lot of reasons. So we absolutely need pictures, but it's very, very difficult to tell the difference between the various species of sharks from a dorsal fin or from a tail. Unless you have them in hand, it's very, very difficult. For example, spinner sharks and black tips. Both spinner sharks and black tips jump out of the water and spin. Both black tips and spinner sharks have black tips. The easiest way to tell the difference between a black tip and a spinner shark is you roll it onto its back and you look at the little fin right before its tail. If it has black tip, that's actually a spinner shark. If it's white, that's a black tip. So that's just one very blatant example of how to tell the difference between two species of sharks that are here. So when you start getting into dusky sharks and sandbar sharks, it's very difficult to tell the difference between them to an identification level. Something like a thresher shark, very easy to tell if you see this giant whip-like tail splashing through a bunker school. Hammerhead, if you are able to see its head, obviously that's very easy to tell. But outside of those very, very, very distinct body features, it's almost impossible to viewing a shark to be able to tell the difference. So be happy to help though, but that's my experience and 2 cents in shark identification.
Yep.
Thanks so much, Greg.
Just add real quickly, again, if you hear a report of a bull shark or a tiger shark, you should really take that with a grain of salt and ask who did that ID, and maybe ask to see pictures, because it's very, very rare to see those animals here.
Great. And we just have a couple more brief questions before we wrap up. One being, and I think we already touched about this, is that do whale sharks visit our waters?
Yes. You want to
Yes.
talk about it, or you want me to? So yeah, our biologists that survey whale populations in the York Bight, they did an aerial survey for quite a few years, and every once in a while they would see some whale sharks show up on the shelf break out in the Hudson Canyon there. So seasonal visitors to New York, feeding on phytoplankton.
Great. Thank you. And just before we wrap up, we did have a brief little question, just a fun one to end. What is your favorite movie and why is it Jaws? No,
I've never seen Jaws. I think I might be the only shark biologist who's never seen Jaws.
Oh. All right. Well, we do have I'll do a quick last one. We want to just pop up.
Just to comment on that, because I think I know who that question. Studying baby white sharks that we do, that is absolutely the first question I ask before anybody new comes on board is, when is the last time you've watched Jaws? And if it wasn't within the last week, then they're not allowed on my boat. Because
I guess that counts me out.
We will often speak in only Jaws quotes. So if you've never seen the movie, you won't be able to participate in the conversation.
That's wonderful. All right. And then just one last brief one we had pop up. Do you guys have any advice to kind of budding marine and environmental scientists, and how much is technology changing this field?
Well, I will say budding, getting out on the water, getting to the water, going to like something like an aquarium. If you can't get out and see sharks, you can see them in an aquarium. You can participate in camp programs and education programs. There are tons of materials online, and we certainly help make that accessible to any of your students. But in terms of the questions about technology, I often say you should, as much technology as you can handle, whether it's learning how to use genetic techniques, GIS, understanding use of tags, because the value of that transcends the species that you might be interested in, and you can answer all kinds of questions. And the more we start looking at the interactions among species, the more we'll be able to understand the impact that we're having on these on our ecosystems. So yes, technology can play a big part.
My advice to a budding marine scientist is, is networking. So how do you build a network? You build a network by participating in the types of activities that Mary just described, whether it's being able to get a volunteer position at an aquarium or with an organization that's looking to take volunteers. It may, volunteering is, there's not a lot, at least for our organization, we have a very small number of places. The boats are small. It may cost you, a small donation or something to get you on board. But once you're on board, do your job. Just work hard, try to learn as much as you can, and then build that network that can help you to put in a good word as you're moving through, your the cards that life gives you. So I would say work on building a strong network.
Yep, and I agree with both Mary and Greg on their statements, but build your skill set to as strong as you can. Don't get locked down with, oh, I only want to study sharks, or I only want to do this, because you got to start somewhere. It could be working with bunker, who knows? It could be if you have a foot in the door and you can do that activity and build your skill sets along the way, you can wind up where you want to be eventually. But yeah, networking is huge. We have such a great community of environmentalists on Long Island, and that extends down the coast as well. So you really got to show people that you're hardworking, you have a good skill set, and you're able to do the job, and don't give up. You can get where you want to go.
All right, wonderful. Thank you so much again to all our fantastic speakers for presenting tonight. This has been a great and informative discussion. As we've mentioned, this video is being recorded and will be available on our CTEC website soon after this presentation. And we will also have a follow-up email to all our Zoom registrants, and you're all welcome to share that information as well. Again, we want to also mention that this is the first in our Community Science LI series. The next one will be August 2nd, and that'll be about oysters. So we're keeping up the marine theme a bit. So please join us for that. You can find all the information for all the webinar series on our website at ctuc.org. Additionally, if you're interested in some of these other community science opportunities, we also have a great website, the Long Island Wildlife Monitoring Network, WMNLI.org, and that has all of these opportunities. For instance, it has the Shark Spotter Program. It also has some other ocean and marine species as well, and it has a bunch of contacts for rescue and rehabilitation of wild animals as well. So please check out that resource, and please feel free to reach out to any of us if you have questions, and we hope you all have a fantastic evening, and thank you again for joining us.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you so much.